61-2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, this is 1. Left land, swim west, copy. Crossing 24. Crossing at 24 is
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just 70, roger, report type southeast, connection, for the midway, and field selected.
Well, folks, this week it is part 2 with Air Mshl Raghu Nambiar. And this episode we'll focus on his experiences in Kargil. As you all know, you've probably watched the video on YouTube. On 24th June, Air Mshl Nambiar, then a wing commander, dropped a laser-guided bomb using the Litening targeting pod from a Mirage 2000 precisely on some tents at the top of Tiger Hill, which was proving to be a very difficult target for the Indian Army. And that brought about the rapid end of the Kargil conflict. So today we're going to focus on that. Join me for the conversation. But in case you didn't hear part 1, do go back and listen to that because that was also full of some amazing insights. So can we change gears now to Kargil? Where were you when things were heating up and what were the trials that you all did in preparation? And then just describe those critical sorties that you flew in as much detail as you can remember.
uh, Ghana, when Kargil actually started, I'm talking of the first 2 weeks of May. I was actually in uh, in Bangalore, uh, sitting in the real-time simulator at ADE, doing testing on the LCA flight control law. Uh,
Okay.
I was at that time posted as the SFSIO, or the Station Flight Safety and Inspection Officer at Gwalior.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But I had been roped in by Vayu Bhavan to come in and help in NFTC. And that is what I was doing when the war broke out. So I got a phone call from Gwalior, come back immediately. And I rushed back. And this was about the 15th or 17th of May when I did get back to Gwalior. And by this time, all that the Mirages were doing were like sort of conserving its resources for a deployment. And also the Cyril, which is an electronic intelligence gathering pod, was being flown along the Kargil as well as the Western Front to determine the electronic order of battle of the opponents. This is what we were doing, and we were not really sure of what we were to do, in the sense what was our role going to be and where we were going to be deployed. We were not very certain. The Kargil was a very small battlefront of just about 150 odd kilometers. Uh, and In the natural course, probably we would have not even devoted a MiG 21 unit into that particular battlefront,
Right.
given our forces at that point in time. You may recollect we had about 42 squadrons. This included the Canberras and such like. We had 42 squadrons at that point in time. And we also had the Su-30 cars, the MiG-29s, the Mirage 2000s. We had two squadrons. Uh, and Things were like it always was in peacetime. By about the 20th of May, if I remember correct, one of the Canberras operating out of Agra had been launched upon by a Stinger missile, and it had recovered safely to Srinagar, piloted by Wing Commander Perumal. And that was the first inkling we got that there is this latent threat emanating from that side, where we have to really buckle up and make sure that we stayed safe. We were deployed to our ops location, Adhampur. The Mirages at that time were deployed to 4 bases. One set of us went to Adhampur, that was 7th Squadron, and it was configured for the ground attack role. In the sense, we only 6 aircraft could carry. We had only equipment and accessories available for 6 aircrafts, and all of this was sent to Adampur. One squadron moved to primarily to Ambala to carry out air defense tasks and electronic warfare tasks. 7th Squadron, a detachment of 6 aircraft, went to Sirsa, and another 6 aircraft from one squadron was deputed to Jodhpur. So this was the deployment at that time for the Kargil operations. It was a full-fledged deployment, as if there was a war along all the fronts with
Mhm. So you moved
Kargil.
with all your stores and armament and everything.
Almost everything we moved,
Mm.
and that was the way it was. And the war started. Uh, People had already moved out from Adampur, where we were deployed, to Srinagar. 2 to 3 squadron, as well as Nachiketa squadron, that was 9 squadron, had moved out to Srinagar and were operating out of that. And you may recollect, in the first few days of the first days of the war, we lost Nachiketa's MiG-27, which
Yeah,
flamed out, and then followed that by Ajay Ahuja getting shot down
Ajay
when he was
Ojha,
trying to
right.
pick up Nachiketa. And the next day we lost MiG-17, and therefore that was uh, when all this was happening. We were already at Adampur. So then there was a 24 hours pause in the war, as far as the air war was concerned, to find out exactly what to do right, or how do we continue. Because at this sort of loss rate, we would have written off our air force in little time, with nothing left for anything else to be done. The Stinger threat was predominant, uh, and therefore it was very important to stay above the Stinger bubble and operate out of that. And naturally, the Mirage 2000, with its reserve of power, was ideally suited to operate at those altitudes. Unfortunately, we did not have any weapons which were suitable for release from high altitude.
Okay.
We did not have any low drag weapon which had been inducted. However, uh, good about 2 or 3 years before this, AST had been tasked to, uh, you know, uh, put the Spanish 250 kg bomb on various platforms. These bombs were leftovers from the Ajit. They had been procured from Spain. They were 250 kg in weight, and they were typically the shape and dimensions of the Mark 82, which is the NATO standard bomb.
Right.
They were in our inventory, but since the Ajit had been phased out, they were sort of hanging around without somebody to use them. So these were qualified on the MiG-27. They were and the MiG-23 BN. They were also qualified on the Mirage 2000 in a few configurations. But this was all done, and the reports were written, but the bomb itself was not inducted into the field. Thus, our pilots in 7th Squadron had never dropped a single bomb, much less the Spanish 250 kg. And neither had any of our technicians even sort of practiced loading up a bomb, this particular bomb, that is. All they had was the knowledge of the laser guided bomb, the 1000 kg one, which they used to, sort of shackle onto the central line pylon of the Mirage. That was all the experience that we had. Our ground equipment was sparse, just 6 sets. That means 6 aircraft at a time could probably do ground attack, and that was the way it was. So we had this challenge that, firstly, we didn't have a weapon, and secondly, we didn't have the pilots and technicians capable of operating those weapons, even if they were inducted.
Okay.
So this was after we deployed to Adampur, and the war had actually started. Nothing happened before that in terms of forethought and sort of planning to make sure this was happening. So immediately 2 aircrafts were flown out from Adampur to Jodhpur, along with all the launchers which were required for operating the Spanish 250 kg bomb. And a set of trials were done with the Spanish 250 kg bomb by 2 squadron pilots to see how it worked out. I must tell you that we were fortunate at that point in time to have as many as 3 test pilots, Mirage operational test pilots at Adampur.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We had uh, Air Commodore Rohit Verma, we had Wing Commander Tiwari, and I myself all three test pilots, and therefore it did not take us much time to sort of get to speed on any new system which were sort of evolved or brought about. And I think that was something which I think was a big advantage to the Mirage fleet.
Mm. Right, right. Mm.
We were in the field, we were
Operationally current and
operationally current, and not only operationally current, we had bags of experience. Between Rohit Verma, Tiwari, and I, we were probably, I myself had over 1,000 hours of experience on the Mirage at that point. And I think so between Tiwari and Rohit Verma combined, they would have another 1,500 hours. So it was like a huge bag of experience, and with people who were capable of, employing technology in the correct method and willing to take calculated risks to achieve a particular objective. There was an initial hesitancy in the field to employ the Mirage, primarily because firstly it didn't have a weapon, and therefore there was this challenge of getting us a weapon. That happened. IL-76 flew in from all corners, some from KKD, some from various other places where the 250 kg bombs were under storage. The technicians who were conversant with the 250 kg bomb, the Spanish bomb, it came with its own set of fuses. It had the MU3, the MU8, and the Kappa 3 fuse. And all their fusing components, they were flown in from all over. They were gathered into Adhampur. The people there learned how to fuse the bomb and set about it, how to load it onto the Mirage. All these things were, you know, being done on the fly when a war was on.
mm.
So there was this
Wow.
challenge to stay safe and to make sure that you did everything and not get into a dangerous situation. So all this was happening when the war was on. We were ourselves taken, all of us, in an AN-32 flown into Srinagar, and we were put into two Mi-17s, and primarily because all of us could have been actually put into one Mi-17, but for purposes of redundancy and safety, we were split into two batches. We were
Hmm.
split into two, and then we were taken to the front. Uh, we were flown towards Dras and the Kargil area to have a sort of a recce of the sort of terrain we would be operating under. We had not seen this place before. You can imagine that. And as we were sort of reaching towards Dras, there was some firing reported, probably artillery fire, which sort of uh, was sort of very threatening to the aircraft in the sky. And it just quickly landed at a place called Bimbat, and that was the sort of recce which we did. We got out of the aircraft. Fortunately there was a division headquarters just next door to the helipad, and we were invited in for a cup of tea and for a briefing on what the army was facing. um, a major general who was the commander of that division, I remember him, a gentleman, Major General Puri, Mohinder Puri, I think was his name. He sort of briefed us on what was the sort of the lay of the land and what are the challenges that they were facing. They had sort of marked every hilltop with a red flag, indicating there could be enemy here, 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 here. It was like all over. It was as if there was some sort of something like a huge amount of Pakistanis had intruded. Uh, Actually, the reality was far different. It was they were confined to certain pockets because there are huge amount of logistics challenge to support them on these hilltops.
Yeah. Hmm.
We could see Tiger Hill far away, and which was quite clearly visible. And uh, we were told that there were people there on top. The Pakistanis were there on top of that as well. Those days they were being called intruders. They were not very certain if they were actually Pakistanis or terrorists or what. So that was the sort of environment we found ourselves in. A lot of doubts about what was happening. But be that as it may, as we were ready to depart and go back to Srinagar, we found we saw to our surprise that were four or five ambulances which were on its way coming from uh, east of us, heading towards Srinagar, which is to the west along the same valley. The ambulances came to a halt, and one of the doctors came out and said that they had about 12 casualties in these ambulances, and would we take them with us back to Srinagar? Uh, so our captain of the Mi-17 agreed, and all of them were sort of uh, taken in on board in our two helicopters. And I was sitting with this young man. He was probably about 20, in his 20s. I was then about almost about 39 years old. So he was this guy was this youngster was on his 20s, and he was not lying down. He was sort of sitting next to me, and I was looking at him to try and work out what was wrong with him and why was he being sort of taken out of the battlefield. So what I noticed was that onto his belt was hooked a set of jungle boots, which he was sort of being, tied by the its laces to his belt. So I asked him, "What is this thing? What are you? Why are you taking your jungle boots tied up like this?" So then he showed me the jungle boot. It had sort of been pierced by an AK-47 round or some bullet and had sort of imploded, and it was in shatters. And actually, his leg was in it when the bullet went through. So he showed me
Oh,
his
oh.
foot, and
Mm,
he had been sort of amputated. They had sort of
oh,
taken off the ankle and below and sort of patched him up. And I said, "So why don't you throw this boot off?" I mean, this is a jungle boot, okay? And mind you, the temperatures there were in the minus 15 and minus 20s at altitude. And I asked him, why were you carrying this boot? He says he was taking it to show it to his mother.
oh,
Youngster who was barely 20 years old. Can you imagine the scenario? He was taking this boot to show his mother how he lost
canvas
his
and
leg.
rubber. Mm,
It was very, very sort of a poignant moment for me, and felt really, disturbed that such things were happening. I said, it's all their faces were, absolutely with the skin, the front, all their faces were sort of pink or red in color because the skin, which had become dark brown, had peeled off because of the wind, which used to be at very high speeds throughout the period. So, oh, that was a very sorry sight. They were all looking terribly distressed. This was the guy who was the only chirpy one, but he too had lost his leg. But sort of, the sort of attitude and sort of, emotional strength that he displayed was truly amazing. We took them immediately by chopper. The chopper flew in directly to the helipad at the base hospital at Srinagar. We discharged these guys and then found took off for the base at Srinagar. We then got back into the AN-32, which was waiting for us, and then we went back to Anandpur. So this was the sort of sector recce which was carried out for us to show us where the targets were. We saw nothing. Actually, honestly, it's just a set of hills, which was a set of huge white top mountains and a valley. That's about it. And honestly, I think it was it was not really required to go there, but we got a sense of the sort of theater which we would be operating in. We got a sense of the sort of confusion which was there with the army
mm, right.
in at the field level as to what was actually the situation. This was on the 30th of May, and it's after this date that we started dropping the Spanish 250 kg from altitude. Uh, you may recollect after the first 3 days of operation where we had lost three aircrafts, the Indian Air Force continued to fight the Operation Safed Saga for the next 50 days till the 12th of July. And despite this long stretch, we never lost any more aircrafts. We stayed safe and we continued to operate and deliver bombs. And I think the Mirages primarily were very effective, both dropping dumb bombs as well as laser guided bombs. And more importantly, the dumb bombs. Because I think the dumb bombs firstly packed a large punch, six 250 kg bombs being left accurately really devastated the targets. While a laser guided bomb, which is of the, had about a 500 kgs of a warhead, would actually only blow up that one single place and did not have any collateral effect, which was very desirable at those altitudes.
Mm,
We went on to deliver as many as 8 LGBs during the entire 50 days of operations. The first LGB was delivered around the 24th of June, and the last LGB was probably in July. And out of the 8 LGBs delivered, I was fortunate to be selected to drop five of them. So it was like very interesting days. Uh, I think two others were dropped by Rohit Verma and one was dropped by uh, Tiwari. All test pilots did the drops of all the LGBs.
Visual to shoot before just 70, like your report IP southeast, connect for midway, and field still active.
So tell us about those sorties. And so you'd done some recce, and you'd identified the places. And I was listening to an interview of yours, and I never realized it till you mentioned it, which is that this stuff is really difficult to pick out from the air. It looks a lot like anything else. It's the big Nunkun and K2 were the big distinguishing features, but Tiger Hill per se was nothing special. So
Yes,
what
I
was your
mean,
preparation for that LGB drops?
the LGB drop absolutely. The first LGB drop was on the 24th of June. Actually, we got airborne for the same mission on the 23rd. But unfortunately, or fortunately for the other side, the opponents, Tiger Hill was covered by clouds, so which we could not penetrate with our uh, pod. We could not see the hilltop, and therefore it was uh, what we call a DNCO, duty not carried out mission. So we had to come back and land, and we prepared for the next day, hoping that the cloud which had sort of covered it on that day would probably have gone away. We waited for almost half an hour on top of Tiger Hill, waiting for the, not exactly on top, but a little bit away, waiting for the cloud to go away. We made two or three passes, hoping that, because after all, the wind speed was fairly strong, and it at about 50 knots, you do expect that a cloud will blow off and it would be clear. But as one cloud blew off, another one would come in its place, and in this process, as we were carrying out, we're waiting on top. Uh, we saw a stinger come up for us. My backseater first saw
Wow.
the stinger come up, and he immediately screamed, "Flare left!" And I immediately started flaring. Flaring is we had a set of flares which we carried. We carried about 30 of them, and I immediately pitched the aircraft up and started flaring left and throttle back to idle. And thereafter, carried out a maneuver uh, to defeat the stinger. What but we looked inside. I did not personally pick up the stinger because it's fairly small and it's probably had exhausted its jet plume. But Manish was with me, saw the stinger come up. It sort of lazily arced towards us, and thereafter started falling downward because we were well above it, and probably it defeated it, and it fell away. I mean, I did not have an opportunity to pick it up personally, but he saw it throughout its entire journey heading towards us. So this was a scary time, and I think the next day when we were going in the same direction, we were very clear that stingers were definitely there, and we had to be that much more alert. Uh, Now, on the 24th, when we were going in for the uh, LGB mission, the chief, Air Chief Marshal Tipnis, had arrived at Adampur the previous evening, on the 23rd evening, and he expressed a desire that he would like to see the first LGB being dropped. So,
Okay.
third aircraft was prepared, and he flew with the CO, Wing Commander Chabra, with himself in the rear seat, and staying well within well within well south of Kargil, but overlooking Tiger Hill so that he could get a view of what was happening. So three of us, we got airborne from Adampur. Uh, I was with Manish Yadav once again. Uh, Squadron Leader Tiwari was with Squadron Leader Mohan Rao, was the flight commander, and the CO was with Air Chief Marshal Tipnis. That was the three aircraft formation which got airborne from Adampur at about 6:30 in the morning. We were joined by two Mirage 2000 from Ambala, who were flying in the air defense configuration to
Air
provide us
defense. Okay. Uh-huh.
top cover, and that's how we sort of set course. We flew a pattern which made sure that we would not be picked up by the radars across the border, which were there on our west as we headed northwards. Uh, I remember, going through all my switch selections, a large number of switch selections. The laser designation pod itself called for some switch selections. The electronic warfare with us, we had the Remora that had a set of switch selections. The flare, everything else. I mean, everything had to be sort of checked. And since we were going harm's way, we kept rechecking it. So we had half an hour of checking and rechecking. And despite the scenario being absolutely amazing, you can imagine it looked something like what Switzerland does,
Right.
miles and miles, over 600, 500 kilometers of hilltops hilltops all below you. The Nunkung Peak was right on our track. It was at about 23,000 feet. We were flying at about 30. And finally, we saw Tiger Hill, and further ahead, we could see K2 very clearly. Tiger Hill was picked up primarily because of the laser designation pod, the Litening, which had come from Israel. Now, that was directed by the inertial navigation system to look exactly at the coordinates of Tiger Hill, which we had fed in a priori.
Okay. Aha.
So,
Got it.
even though we were 50 to 60 kilometers away from Tiger Hill, the pod was looking at Tiger Hill based upon the inertial navigation system accuracies. So it was very easy to pick it up. And Tiger Hill, once you had it on your display, it was just a matter of simply moving the crosshair and finally adjusting for any minor anomalies, and then zooming into the highest level. We initially used to have a wide area scope of about 2.5 into 2.5, and then at the final stages where we could zoom down to into 20 magnification. So we could start, seeing things from far away, well before the naked eye could actually perceive what was there on the ground.
And between you and Monish, how were you dividing up responsibilities?
I was sitting in the front seat, and I was responsible for weapon delivery and for handling the pod in the initial stages. And obviously, since the backseat did not have electronic warfare, all those were my responsibilities. Manish's task was to uh, handle the pod in the final stages after I dropped the bomb. Because once I dropped the bomb, which was only possible from the front seat, Manish was responsible for making sure that the crosshair remained on the target right to till the weapon impacted. So that was his responsibility. In addition, we had four eyes in the cockpit, all of them looking around to pick up anybody else, and sort of. And we did not use RT at all, right till the bomb actually hit the target. RT silence was maintained throughout, uh, right from taxi out to take off to join up and to set up the uh, uh, attack run onto the Tiger Hill top. It was all RT silence. Uh, Everything was sort of you know done because of by planning, and RT was to be used only if there was anything which was significantly dangerous or required some intervention of the escorts which were flying above us. So that was the way it was, and
Was there any AVAX at that time in the air that was
no,
keeping
we
an
had no
eye and make
AVAX.
sure?
No,
No
we had no
AVAX.
AVAX. We had no AVAX. Indian Air Force got its AVAX only in 2011. The first AVAX flew in around that time. I think the first AVAX, if I remember correct, flew in 2009, and the second and the third came in 2010 and 2011. So we were 1999, that was 10 years before the first AVAX came. So there was no question of any AVAX. We had aircraft which used to get airborne from Srinagar, which is rather close to Kargil. They were the MiG-29s and the MiG-21. They used to provide us some sort of air defense cover as well. But we had our own Mirage 2000s with us, and that was what we were,
That was enough.
very happy
Okay.
with. We were more than enough with. And we had set ourselves two tasks on that particular day. We were supposed to strike Tiger Hill, and after that we were supposed to, after dropping the bomb, head towards a place called 4388, which is roughly to the northwest of Tiger Hill, to pick up some enemy hangars and such construction and helipads which they had put in our territory, uh, and to film that and get it back so that we could sort of hit it in another occasion. So that was the
Okay. That
task
was
for
a
that day.
logistics base or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it was no, it was not the logistics base of Munthodalo. This was something much smaller, but it was
Okay.
within a valley. And 4388, despite being a trig height, was actually a point on the valley floor. Strangely, all other trig heights of 4388 or 5140 or Tiger Hill, which was 5062, they were all on the hilltops. But strangely, for some reason, 4388 was on the valley floor of a valley which ran from a place called Gultari towards Tiger Hill. So all the logistics for Tiger Hill used to flow along this valley and thereafter climb a spur of Tiger Hill and reach it. That was a sort of the lay of the land, so to speak.
Right, right. So tell me about the moment of release and when you came up on. Uh,
Oh, it was, I mean, it gives me goosebumps to think about those days. Uh,
right.
I can never ever forget the every moment of that particular sortie. The aircraft uh, was I mean, everything was absolutely perfect, so to speak. There were not a single dot of a cloud on Tiger Hill that day. We could, on the head down display, even pick up the tents. These tents were white in color. They were the Arctic tents, and they made great sense when the weather was, cold with snow and such like. But in the month of June, the snow had melted even at 16,000 feet altitude at which Tiger Hill is. It had melted, and therefore uh, the whites of the tent was a dead giveaway. And in typical military fashion, these tents were, sort of put together in a small plateau in rows of threes, a total of 9 tents, snugly housed at the very tip. And it was a disaster in the making for the enemy. Line them up in such tight fashion, probably because that was all the land they had available. They had not much choice. And with the naked eye, they were visible from about 7 6 7 kilometers, but with the laser guide pod, they were visible today from about 20 kilometers onwards. So we aimed dead ahead for them, quickly zoomed in on the tents, locked our laser onto them, and by about 28 kilometers we were on our attack path, uh, with wings level and at 1,000 kilometers per hour. Things happen very fast at this time. You're concentrating on one single focus, that is to make sure that the bomb goes like right, and therefore the number of steps to be followed, and you quickly went over them one by one, and they had to be done in sequence and correctly. Focused on the thing, fired the laser, got the laser back at us. Normally laser comes back to you only about 20 kilometers, but because of the altitude and the environment, clear weather with not a bit of moisture. First laser return took place at 28 kilometers itself. That's why I know that when I rolled out, I was 28 kilometers. So we manually fire the laser to make sure that what is the range, exact range. So the first range took place at about 28 kilometers. And thereafter, despite the first range being available, which was good enough for the attack, I continuously kept ranging to make sure that I did not sort of have a secondary core or something like that. So and the weapon release range was 8.5 kilometers. That's what we had calculated. This is a manual release in every sense of the word. The bomb software was not there on the aircraft. So therefore, this was a totally manual release. We were required to make sure that the bomb were left at the correct distance. In the Mirage, it's possible to do it on automatic as well. But here there was no automatics because the bomb was different from what was
The
the French
software
bomb.
on the aircraft. Aha.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we were on a manual release, what we call a low altitude mode, so to speak, where the pilot was responsible for pressing the trigger at the correct distance. Everything went exactly as planned. We dropped the bomb at 8.5 kilometers. I handed over the pod to Monish. Uh, Handed over in the sense he now had the controls as far as moving the cursor goes. And I put the aircraft into a violent turn to the left at about 4G, maintaining altitude. And the bomb, when it left the aircraft, it sort of, the bomb weighs in at about 650 odd kgs. So when it leaves the aircraft, you get some sort of a lurch upwards as the aircraft loses its weight by that amount. uh, it just, that is the only sensation that you feel. There is not no any dramatic sound or something like that. It's just a lurch upwards as the aircraft loses weight so rapidly. And I then commenced a turn to the left and kept monitoring what Manish was doing. It was like sort of whatever Manish was doing, I was sort of having an oversight over it, because the same thing was being duplicated in the front seat as well to show you what exactly. So 30 seconds every second then passes by very slowly.
Slowly.
It sort of
Okay.
feels like every second is about a minute. I mean, there is a sort of sensation you get. Time slows down, and you are expecting the bomb to hit, but it is not yet reached. I mean, what is happening? You're worried. I mean, everything was like everything is going correctly, but you're still worried. So much of time, and the bomb is not yet exploded. That is what you're sort of, you start, and then there is, you see the time counter. It is wound down at about 17 seconds to bomb hit. The laser starts firing continuously and automatically. That I saw. The laser, in the display you have a L which starts flashing continuously, indicating that the laser is being pumped at the crosshair, wherever the target was being pointed at. And sure enough, at the exact time, at 30 seconds or thereabout, where it should have hit, it hit and it exploded. It was really dramatic because the explosion was so huge that it covered the entire screen. As it is, we were at very high zoom levels. We were at 20 into 20. And on top of that, the explosion, the dust, and the sort of debris which it threw up, it covered the entire screen. So here we were, task done, and the RT call which we had sort of uh, decided a priori was the Tarzan's famous war call, Bundolo. So that was
Okay.
announced on RT. Bundolo.
Uh-huh.
That was all.
Windle.
Bundolo. And I quick that was announced, and the sense of elation you get when something which you have devoted so much time and you had so
Your
much
entire
anxiety
professional
over.
career.
Exactly, that sort of has been realized, and it was wonderful. And we did a gathering turn to pick up the escorts who were on top, and I set course towards 4388, which is about 12 or 15 nautical miles further to the northwest. I started then looking at the TACAN. We had air-to-air TACAN, which indicates the distance between me and Mohan Rao and Tiwari, and I saw that distance increase. Then I realized that these people had, after dropping the bomb, had set course back to Adhampur. So, so it was me and my escorts left behind, and the other two, that is Chabra and Mohan Rao, that is, and Tiwari and the chief in these two aircraft had set course back to Adhampur. And here we were with three of us. So we set course towards 4388. We filmed it. We picked up a, a hangar, which we clearly got into our film, and then we set course back. And now, since our way back, we decided to go close to Tiger Hill to see what exactly was the sort of damage which we did.
Right, right. Mm.
So we focused our pod onto that where the target was. It was clearly visible that everything had been blown to smithereens. The dust had settled by now. It was almost 10 minutes past the attack. The dust had settled down. There was nothing left. It was like absolutely clear. And then, since we were there, we decided to sort of pan the camera through the entire hill section to see what else was left behind, or if there was anything of interest. And we were close to the target, but at altitude, well out of the stinger bubble, we scanned right through the hill, and that was it. We immediately turned now back towards Adhampur, accelerated to our load limit speed of 0.95 mark, and dashed back to Adhampur, trying to catch up with the other two guys who were in, but they had already landed, and the celebrations were on by the time we reached the crew
Wow.
room. Uh, they had sort of the celebrations had started. They were, everybody were sure what we had hit, and when the tape was put in, our tape, that is, which we had pulled out, we sort of looked at it very closely. And now today, I still have that particular clip. We could see three people rush across, and they were clearly visible on the tape. Uh, we also reached up to 4388 to see what we had seen there, and then we started viewing what we saw in Tiger Hill in the second pass when we were on our way back. And here, to our surprise, we saw just one human who had survived, who was at the very base and climbing upwards towards where we had dropped the bomb. He was about 400 or 500 meters below the peak, and he was climbing upwards. He was, you know, climbing slowly and laboriously upward. This is not visible on the display of the aircraft, But
It was there in
in
the
the crew
tape.
room, seen in a large screen television of about 32 inches, here was this guy slowly moving upwards and walking his way upwards. So, to my mind, at the end of this thing, from what was visible to us, it only appeared that only one person had of this whole uh, caboodle sitting on top of Tiger had survived. There may be others which were not visible to us from our direction, which we were viewing it, but this is what we saw.
Movement wise, that's all you could see.
That's all we could see. It's very important that somebody move for us to pick him up. If he was not moving, the system or the it would his movement would, I mean, his the person wouldn't be visible. So it was a, you know, it was a day full of anxiety in the beginning and elation in the end. We were like we were on cloud nine, thumping ourselves on the back and feeling very proud of what we have done. And
Did you get any feedback from the army on the assessment of damage and things like that from their side?
yes, we got a message which was sent to us by our chief after he landed. He spoke to the army chief, and he spoke to the corps commander. I beg your pardon. Yeah, the corps commander at Srinagar, and the message came back that we had done a wonderful job and we had hit exactly where we were supposed to, and that's visible proof. There's no doubt in our mind as to what we achieved, but the army just sort of reinforced the thing, and I confirmed that, and even said that now it's just a matter of time before they sort of wrapped up the whole area, or words to that effect. So that's where it was.
Visual to show before just 70, Roger, report IP Southeast, connect for midway, and field selected.
So tell me about some of the other LGB drops that you did.
These next set of LGVs are dropped at night. What was happening was that
And the lightning pod has a flare for night drops, is it?
that's right. Yeah, you could use the FLIR even at daytime.
Okay. And for the audience, flare is forward-looking infrared, so
That's right.
yeah.
You had an IR camera, which instead of the conventional CCD camera, allowed you to see both by day and night. It used the IR spectrum, and you could decide what you wanted to see, whether it was black hot or white hot, and the temperature differential between the various objects in its camera field used to be shown in different shades of gray.
Okay.
So IR image is not as easy to interpret as a visual CCD image was, but it offered you the capability of seeing into darkness. And just after this attack, if I remember correct, on the 26th, there was this report that the Pakistanis were sort of reinforcing Tiger Hill, were trying to take it back, and were sort of pushing in forces. So we were required to bomb it at night, and we got airborne for another attack. Unfortunately, in this particular drop which I carried out, the bomb hit exactly where it was supposed to, but did not explode.
Oh,
Obviously, the fuse had malfunction or some such like technical issue. Uh, the bomb hitting the target is clearly visible. We could see the plume of dust and black smoke, or whatever was the residue of the bomb.
right. But no explosion.
It, but the explosion did not take place, and we were a little bit disappointed. Uh, the weapon was new, the fusing technique was new. We were using what is something very primitive. We were using a pistol detonator, which was used in World War II as well. And we were just a 40, 50-year-old fusing technique, when actually the world had graduated it onto electronic fuses and such like. We were still in, at that point in time, we didn't have any proper fuse for the bomb, so we were using what was available. And these sets of pistol detonators had been picked up from wherever in the Air Force they were available and were being employed. So this obviously failed. Subsequent to that, I must tell you that most of the LGBs were dropped in and around Tiger Hill. We then did, after the Tiger Hill was captured on the 3rd of June, the army overran Tiger Hill. There was a fight back from the Pakistanis who tried to recapture it.
Mhm.
There again, we were called up again at night to drop LGBs, and we did exactly that. Two of us, Rohit Verma in one aircraft and me in the other. This time I had uh, Skolnida Patnaik with me in the rear seat. He's now an air marshal and he's the CNC of Eastern Air Command. So the two of us uh, got airborne and we did another drop. Each and every time the laser guided was dropped, bomb was dropped, except on one occasion, it always hit where the crosshair was put.
Mhm.
And despite it being a new and relatively uh, unproven weapon, it performed miraculously well. Uh, the laser guided bomb really lived up to the precision that was expected of it. Uh, so that was where it stood. But I must tell you once again that it was the iron bombs, the dumb bombs, so to speak, which really caused damage. Uh, the first set of iron bombs, the Spanish 250 kg bombs, which we dropped 24 of them on the 16th of June, was what blew up Muntodalo totally.
Right, right.
And I think that was probably the uh, most important mission of the entire Kargil air war, the bomb drop on Muntodalo. Unfortunately, I was not there at uh, Adampur at this stage. Uh, I had been pulled back to Gwalior and we were testing for 1,000 pounders to be put on the Mirage 2000.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And for this reason, I did not have a chance to participate in the Munto Dalo attack. But that, to my mind, was the most important mission which the Indian Air Force flew in Kargil. While Tiger Hill got all the accolades because of the spectacularity of a laser guided bomb drop and the imagery that it produced, the actual effectiveness to my mind was the attack on Munto Dalo and subsequently the attack at 4088, which we hit with 1,000 pounders, which at that point in time when Munto Dalo was on was actually being proven in Pokhran.
Mhm. Okay.
So in this 50-day war, we managed to qualify the 1,000 pounders on the Mirage 2000 and started dropping it six at a time and even five at a time. And I think we all achieved it within 50 days. I think truly amazing. I don't think uh, if it had not been for the war, I don't think we would have condensed so much of flight testing in so little time. Flight testing is a very cautious and very step-by-step approach to, a problem. We don't sort of rush through things. We look at it with a lot of people putting their heads together and trying to evolve a procedure and say a safe procedure, which could be employed by squadron pilots as well with relative safety.
Yeah. And, I think they were fortunate that they had three experienced test pilots right there, and a lot of things came together in that sense.
Exactly. And even pilots who had never dropped a bomb before now became very proficient, primarily because the Mirage was a very easy aircraft to operate. It had sufficient safeties and it did made sure that even a average or a below average pilot suddenly became an ace.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
That's what the aircraft did to you.
Right. Great, sir. I'm so grateful to you for so much time that you've taken. But I also want to just thank you first for your service and for really describing so much in these last 2 hours that we've spent together. I'm really very grateful to you.
Thank you, Gana, and it was wonderful talking to you. Um, my pleasure. And I'm proud that I got paid for what I enjoyed doing. I think that's been my privilege.
That's the thing about military aviation is that you train hard, hoping never to have to use those skills. But when the time comes to do it, you hope you do a good job and live up to the expectations people have for you. And you're one of the few who had that good fortune. It's been an amazing career that I've heard about
Thanks,
today.
Gana. In fact, I didn't mention some things which I thought I should put to you. The Mirages came into the Indian Air Force in June 85. I joined the fleet in 86, and from then, 86 March, that's when I got posted in. And from then till the date I retired, I was actively involved in some way or the other with the Mirage 2000. I flew it almost every year. I accumulated over 2,300 hours on the aircraft,
Fast.
which is a record
Right.
over these many years. We are looking at something like about almost 34 years of 33 years of flying the aircraft. I accumulated over 2,300 hours, and that's a record, and I don't think it can be surpassed. Primarily because we do not fly as much as we did in the past. That was one. Secondly, the Mirage was operated first time in the Operation Pumalai. At that time, I was deployed. I had an opportunity to participate in the aircraft in the mission. Not in the mission. I wouldn't say that I was the mission. I was the T club in charge, and I had the responsibility of ferrying the Mirage to Yalanka, from where we operated for that action. Subsequent to that, during the IPKF induction and de-induction, I was a part of the detachment which was deployed to Trivandrum. Then in Operation Cactus, I was a part of I was along with my CO, we were the first two aircraft to reach over Maldives.
Okay. I did a series on that with Grupi Bevur, General Malik. I didn't realize that the Mirage saw action.
Yeah, we reached Maldives. We flew over it for almost half an hour, me and my CO. And as soon as we departed, two other Mirages came over it uh, and flew over it and maintained a sort of a cap,
While the
some sort of
IL-76 were on the ground.
no, the IL-76 had already landed. This was during the chase for the. If you recollect, there was this chase for
Yes,
the.
yes, MB
Uh,
progress light.
yeah, the Progress Light was getting away with the guys who had taken part in the coup. And you recollect, we were there as a part of the, you know, to sort of show of force and to sort of convince Maldivian that we were there on top and we would. And we were flying at low level, at maybe 250 feet,
Making some noise.
buzzing all the islands there and making sure that we were clearly visible. So these are wonderful times. So I mean, after this there was Kargil. So in every operation that the Mirages took part, except probably in the Balakot strike where I was
Too senior
CNC
by
of
that
Eastern Air
time,
Command.
right?
Yeah, but every other operation I had an opportunity to uh, uh, get to fly. So I consider myself very privileged and fortunate that this happened. In my time, and I see the Mirages. I've flown it both as the earlier model, and now with the upgraded, I've flown that as well. And I do believe that this aircraft will probably be with us in our inventory for the next 15 to 20 years
Mm,
long, more,
wow,
which would probably make it even more older than the Canberras and the Hunters in
right.
terms of longevity.
Longevity. Oh,
The if you Yeah, so if you put in say 20 years from now, that is 2040 or so, that 40 plus another 15 years, so you're looking at 55 years of operation.
but not just operation, and operation where it is at the cutting edge of
Cutting
the Air
edge.
Force. And so they're
Exactly.
not just making up the
Exactly.
numbers, but they're actually playing a pivotal role whenever they show up.
Exactly. You must remember that in the last set of operations I'm talking about in Kargil, there were MiG-29s also in the sky. There were Su-30 cars also there with us. The Su-30, and today when the Balakot operations took place, we had the Su-30 MK as well. But the front, the sort of cutting edge, has been the Mirage, both in the upgraded Mirage as well as the old Mirages. They were there in front. So the aircraft, it's not the people who operated the aircraft which really made the difference. That did definitely do things to make it better. But what was very important that the aircraft was easy to fly and did things much better than others.
Right.
So the pilot flying skills was not a factor in performance achievement.
So have you flown the Rafales? And because
Yes, I had an opportunity to fly the Rafale. I've flown the Rafale about three times now.
right. And
Uh, uh,
what's your sense and assessment? A continuation of the right.
it's an upgrade to the Mirage. I think the Mirage can be upgraded to meet the Rafale's capability. Actually, it's possible to do it within that. I mean, technically it's possible because the handling characteristics and these flight dynamics, all of them are absolutely very similar. I flew the Rafale from the front seat even without a simulator sortie.
how easy it is to fly.
So
Mm.
you can imagine the sort of uh, how easy it is to fly the Rafale if you're coming from a Mirage background. Flew the Rafale. There was no simulator there at that place, so I didn't even have an opportunity to practice on the simulator. So I flew with another test pilot in East, which is the flight test center, and I went there as Air Marshal, strapped up, booted up, did a 1.5 hours briefing, and walked through the cockpit, and then we got airborne. We flew for almost 1.5 hours and through the aircraft around its bases, and I think the aircraft is definite improvement on the Mirage in many ways, and in many ways it sort of will replace the Mirage and its cutting edge role in the Air Force, and will remain so till we have another aircraft which is as capable.
Thank you again, sir. I'm really, really grateful to you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks.
Visual that you before visual landing. Just need 7B, like your report type southeast, connect B64, come into it, and field selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.